the president's address at 8:30, and we will be bringing you that address live here on Newsroom Africa as soon as it gets underway. But this week has also really just cast the spotlight on leadership, and a lack of decisive leadership has been identified as possibly one of the daunting challenges facing South Africa. And this comes as the country battles to deal with violent unrest that has seen looting of shops and damaging of public infrastructure by protesters. Now, to talk more about the apparent lack of leadership in the country, specifically during this particular unrest, we're joined by leadership expert Dr. Andrew Brough and CEO of Decode Communications, Lerato Tshenkeng, to unpack this matter further. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time tonight. So I'll begin with you, Lerato. If you were to look at how government responded to this crisis that we started seeing unfold, and others are arguably saying it did not start on Sunday, but it started outside of the former president's homestead in the days leading up to then his arrest, how would you say government has fared?
Thank you, Bongiwe, and good evening to the viewers. I think I would even take it even a bit further than that, Bongiwe. You remember that the former President Jacob Zuma had appeared in court a number of times, even before that gathering, right? And the lockdown restrictions were still in place. The expectation from a leadership point of view was that, one, when there's a gathering of such, gathering that big, you expect the police to enforce the regulations where the president had announced what the numbers that are meant to be gathered are supposed to be end, right? But take it further. You had to a great extent where there was inaction, then there was not even a firm communication from government that was actually denouncing such, a breaking of the regulation. So it was almost as if it was a free for all, because, now is the deputy president or the former deputy president of the former president of the country, Mr. Jacob Zuma. So, it was almost dealt in a very hush way. It then created set a very bad precedent, but secondly, it created or further fueled the perception that some are more equal than others.
And Dr. Brough, some have said that government could have responded sooner, especially because we saw the ministers just days after we started seeing the looting, and only saw the president going to KwaZulu-Natal today. Others are saying it's too little too late. Would you agree with that?
Good evening to you and to your viewers. I think it's certainly a week of two halves. So if we look at today, we're seeing feet on the ground. We're seeing a president that's doing, to use his word, community engagement. And we're seeing a real presence now that some might argue was lacking earlier on in the week. So I definitely think that they've been listening. They've been learning as we go. And I think the tone has changed, Bongiwe, from what we saw in the beginning of the week to now, some sort of a mea culpa, an admission that maybe they weren't as quick on the draw as they needed to. I think the word that's been used is some inadequacies. So I think that, certainly early on, to quote one minister, they were left with their pants down. But now we do seem to be in some sort of a rhythm. And certainly in a crisis, that's what you're looking for. Quick, sharp, and meaningful communication that's backed up with specific action.
Would you say then that the admission that we were caught with our pants down, there have been some inadequacies, has moved and really made the South Africans feel like government is finally taking control of the situation?
Well, I think if we talk about leadership, Bongiwe, we should not just focus on our state president and cabinet. I want to acknowledge the leadership that's come from the community base, from our community forums, from our neighborhood watches, from church leaders and civic organizations. It really has been so encouraging to see that in the midst of the devastation and the looting and what has been referred to as economic sabotage, that the groundswell of leadership from the bottom up has emerged, and people have said enough is enough. And I think we are stronger now than we were a week ago, as people have just drawn a line in the sand and have been very clear that they're not going to accept this kind of anarchy. That's really what it is. And that they are now looking for clear leadership.
And Lerato, when one looks at the messaging, in earlier on in the week, it was really mixed messaging. We had information, we handed it over to the SAPS. We heard we are in control of the situation. We heard we are going to then look or, start investigating. There's 12 instigators that we've identified. Then later on in the day, we hear we were caught with our pants down. Then again, later in the week, we're hearing there may have been some failures. Talk to us then about what does this mixed messaging do for the message of government to its citizens?
So perhaps let's start with the function of messaging, right, Bongiwe? So with messaging, you are able to, if it's consistent, you are able to build trust and confidence in the citizens, right? Because ordinarily with your messaging, and when it's consistent, you are then able to build or at least communicate a series of decisions and actions that you are taking, right? And what citizens want to hear from the leadership, whether it's political, community leaders, or even business leaders.
To then have been behind some of what we have been seeing in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Let's then pick up this discussion with our guests as we then, Lerato, before we were we kind of cut the conversation short. We had to listen to that briefing. But when you then listen to what we just heard from Mr. Thulani Ngcobo, I'm not sure how much of it you were able to hear. Now that we then, we're hearing and seeing reports suggesting that he could be a person of interest here when it comes to what has been happening. And now this latest turn of event, it certainly looks like there's a lot that we still need to piece together.
Bongiwe, in fact, this interruption segues exactly into the point that I was making earlier around messaging, right? So the first thing that what Mr. Jomo has done now is that he literally pulled from the PR playbook of saying, because there is an information gap, let me take the opportunity. And that's exactly what they have done, right? What we've all been demanding as South Africans is that we want to see an intelligence-led kind of messaging, right? And of course, it has almost been to Professor Boff's point earlier to say that the week of two halves, at least closer to this latter end of the week, you get in the sense that there is some semblance of from the justice cluster, right? But the point really here is that Mr. Jomo, secondly, he's now going to create and fuel speculation, right? Because what we are likely not to have, or at least what we're likely to have, is that there may be a briefing only tomorrow again from the GCIS, and they may not even address some of the things that he is raising. But even this action by him, the litigation action, it may again just be saying, I'm calling the government's bluff, and it's now your move. What are you going to do?
Interesting. Dr. Brough, as we wrap up then our conversation tonight, we're expecting the president to speak at around 8:30. We've seen a lot of developments then. What should he say to inspire the nation's confidence?
We've seen, Bongiwe, is that today there was a joint media statement by the South African government and business leaders. And many of the sentiments that were put out in that statement, I think, are the things that we're looking for the president to reinforce tonight. What happens next? Guarantee in terms of supply chain, guarantee in terms of safety and security, an urgent need to execute on the economic recovery plan, collaboration between government and CEOs, and decisive action to drive recovery in the short term. I think if those messages are reinforced by our president tonight, Bongiwe, many of us will be reassured, and we will feel that there is a greater sense of direction and forward momentum and renewed hope at a time when that surely is lacking.
Thank you so much to you both for your time tonight. That was insightful indeed. Economic recovery, that activity then, economic activity, certainly a lot of business people are looking to hear what the president's plan around this is going to be, what government is going to do at a practical level to ensure that we see that kind of activity resume there. Logistics companies decrying the fact that they are losing 100 million rand a day. that is where the situation is tonight. We're looking then to the president as to some of those answers tonight. That was Dr. Brough, Dr. Andrew Brough, who's a leadership expert and CEO of Decode Communications, Lerato Tshenkeng, who were really looking at the leadership crisis that unfolded during this particular week. In just a moment, Dumikhas was standing by to bring you the very latest.